Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call this Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, November 10th, 2021 to order at 1:30 p.m. My name is Terry Fong and I'm the Acting Chief Administrative Officer for the ACRD. It is my pleasure to call this meeting to order in advance of the election of the chairperson and vice chairperson, as this is the inaugural board meeting for 2021-2022 year. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that and honor the fact that those of us in the boardroom are conducting our business today on the traditional territories of the Shot and Hoopachesset First Nations. I'd also like to advise all attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the ACRD website. There are numerous ways that the public can participate in this meeting, including attending in person in the boardroom, attending the Zoom webinar, or by emailing questions and or comments to responses@acrd.bc.ca. Finally, I would like to take a moment just to let you on Zoom know whose attendance is in the boardroom today. There's actually quite a few of us. So today we have John Jack, Director from Huu-ay-aht First Nation, Diane Bodner, Director from Area F Cherry Creek, Wilfred Coots, Director from Uchuckalset, Kel Roberts, Director from Area C Long Beach, Mike Erg, the General Manager of Planning or Development Services, and Wendy Thompson, the General Manager of Administrative Services. Now I'd like to pass the meeting over to Wendy to conduct the elections of chair and vice chair.
Thank you. So I'll just quickly provide an overview and then the voting procedures today, because we are doing this meeting hybrid. So as per the Local Government Act, at the first board meeting held on November 1st of each year, the board must elect a chair and vice chair from amongst their members. The Regional District Procedures Bylaw specifies that the chairperson automatically becomes the vice chair of the Regional Hospital District, and the vice chairperson of the ACRD automatically becomes the chairperson of the Regional Hospital District. So for today, as this meeting is being held hybrid, which means some members are in the boardroom and the others are participating by Zoom, we are going to conduct the election and email, if there is an election, email the ballots to the Board of Directors, and they can conduct their vote by email confidentially to myself, and then Terry Fong, Acting Chief Administrative Officer, and myself will conduct the election and announce the results. So if there's any questions, I'll take them now. If not, I'll get started. Great. So I will call for nominations for chairperson of the Alberni Clackatt Regional District for 2021-2022 a first time.
I'd like to nominate John Jack as chair for the 2021-2022.
Thank you. Director Jack, do you accept that nomination?
I do.
Thank you. I'll call for nominations a second time for chairperson of the ACRD for 2021-22. And I'll call for nominations for chairperson of the ACRD for 2021-2022 a third time. Great. Okay, there being no further nominations, I declare Director John Jack chairperson of the ACRD Board of Directors and vice chair of the Hospital District for 2021-2022. Congratulations. Did you want me to conduct the vice or?
Yeah, I think probably best that way.
Great. So now we'll conduct an election of vice chair of the Board of Directors for 2021-2022. Call for nominations for vice chair for the ACRD Board of Directors a first time. Director Beckett.
Thank you. I would like to nominate John McNabb.
And Director McNabb, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call for nominations a second time for vice chair of the board for 2021-22. And I call for nominations a third time for vice chair of the board for 2021-2022. Great, thank you. There being no further nominations, I declare Director John McNabb Vice Chair of the Board of Directors for 2021-2022. Congratulations, and we'll turn the chair over to Chairperson Jack.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and recognize and really thankful for the acclamation. This is quite a vote of confidence, so thank you very much. With that in mind, however, I think we do have an agenda before us, and I do believe that we have an item to add to the agenda. So I'm wondering, is it Director Bodner, or would you like to introduce it, or Wendy?
Would you like me to explain it, or would you like me to just make a motion?
Maybe do both. So explain it and then move it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it was brought up at the air quality meeting that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change were very supportive of the Valley having their air quality bylaws passed. And I would like to see also that it be acknowledged Earl Payne and Dr. Hasselbach, I understand, were very supportive of that. So I would like to make a formal motion to that.
Okay. So with that, that is to send a joint appreciation letter with the Air Quality Council to the Ministry of Health. So you'd like to move an approval of the agenda as amended, correct?
Yes, but I have more to the motion.
So if I can, we can consider that under late items under section 13 of the agenda today.
Yeah, we will definitely get to that, so thank you. Okay, do we have a seconder for the agenda, Director McNabb? Please go ahead. Or are you just second? Okay. Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none. Well, sorry, can't declare the motion carried. That's who I am. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Okay, I just got something in the chat to recognize that Sarah Reimer is here for Director Shannon for Beaufort. So I'd just like to welcome Director Reimer. Okay, the next item is declarations. Does anyone have any declarations of conflict of interest, perceived conflict of interest, or gifts exceeding $250? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, thank you, Director Coots. Director Coots is currently representing Ho-Chuk-Lasset at the government-to-government forum for the Monos First Nations, and so he has to run. Okay, with that in mind, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the Board of Directors meeting minutes for October 27th, 2021. Thank you, Director Roberts, and seconded by Director Beckett. Does anyone have any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is the Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting minutes for November 3rd, 2021.
Move the minutes.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodner. Okay. Any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. Normally I talk about the 10-minute time limit and all of those sorts of things, but Inspector Rochette knows all about that. So we'll just give it away to him. Thank you and welcome, Inspector.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I know we have a time restraint of 10 minutes, but I just want to take a minute to introduce one of our new members here is the Staff Sergeant in charge of operations. I'm just going to let him introduce himself and say a few words, and then I'll go over the stats for the third quarter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've had the opportunity to meet some of you, but for those who I haven't met, my name is Mike Thompson. Recently transferred here from Whitehorse, Yukon, and look forward to the opportunity to work with all of you. I can say that right now it's -17 in Whitehorse and snowing, so pretty pleased to be part of this group here. So yeah, thank you for the invite, and look forward to working with all of you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So I'm just going to go over the police stats for the third quarter, which is July, August, and September. And I'll have a few comments at the end, and then I'll be open to answer any questions you may have. So for the quarter, we received 598 calls for the regional district, which is 17% of all the calls for service received by the Port Alberni detachment. We've seen an increase in criminal offenses by 18% compared to the same quarter in 2020. So, like I mentioned, calls for service 598, which has gone down by 2% compared to the same quarter last year, which was at 612. Now, if we break it down, violent crime, we've seen an increase from 24 to 30. So it's an increase by 25%. Property crime has gone up slightly from 45 to 53. Other criminal code has remained the same at 22. Drug offenses, we have 1. Total criminal code, like I mentioned earlier, we went from 90 to 106 for an increase of approximately 18%. And criminal traffic, when I mention criminal traffic, it's driving while prohibited, criminal charges. We stayed the same at 8. Like I mentioned earlier, we've seen an increase in violent crime. I'm just going to break it down now at 7 different categories to kind of explain a little bit as to why we've seen an increase. Assaults have gone up from 12 to 15, which is an increase of 25%. Assault with weapon, causing bodily harm, 2 to 1, so we only had 1. Harassment, which is when we talk about harassment, we talk about criminal harassment as well as online harassment, which is something we're starting to see more often. But for this quarter, we've seen a reduction from 3 to 2. We've had no robbery complaints. Sex offenses, when we talk about sex offenses, sexual assault, sexual interference, from 1 to 2. Where we've seen a big increase that had a negative impact on for violent crime is uttering threats have gone from 4 to 10, and domestic violence reports have gone 6 to 12, so it's an increase by 100%. So when I mentioned earlier 15 assaults, out of those 15 assaults, 12 were domestic violence. So the other issue is, like, when we talk about domestic violence, obviously it's been well documented in the past, issues related with COVID and less access to assistance, financial pressure. We've seen an increase, and it's across board. If I look at statistically the statistics for being violent, all the detachment have seen a pretty significant increase in domestic violence reports, and unfortunately we're going from 6 to 12. Now, if you look at property crime, auto theft, we only had 1 this quarter. Break and enter, and then we break and enter is business. We went from 4 to 2. Break and enter residence, we only had 1 report. and none for break and enter other, which usually means a shed or a garage. So we've had no reports. Mischief to property went from 17 to 18. Mischief to property is basically vandalism. Theft went from 12 to 10, and pretty minimal when we look at possession of stolen property. We had one file. Shoplifting, we only had one, as well as theft from vehicles. We had 3 files compared to 4 files same quarter last year. Now, other criminal code cause disturbance. We've seen an increase from 9 to 11. We've seen a decrease when it comes to breach of probation from 3 to 1, but an increase on breach of bail conditions from 5 to 7. And then when we look at intoxicated in public, we've only had 2 files the quarter, which was the same as the same quarter last year. Just general comments in regards of the detachment. What we've seen that I mentioned at other meetings is we've been tasked with sending at least 1 officer every week to Fairy Creek to deal with address the protests there. So obviously it's been a huge demand for the detachment to send 1 or 2 officers every week since early summer. And I have members scheduled to go until the end of November. And we're hoping that things may change after that. So we'll see what happens in December. Because of our commitment to Fairy Creek, I didn't have to deploy any members to the fires in the interior, so which was helpful. The other thing too is we've been looking at the impact of the work done on the road that just started to Banfield. I think it will most likely increase the calls for service for the local detachment. With the improvement of the road, there'll be more traffic. More people will attend the area for the beaches, camping, to go to Banfield. And so I'm currently in the process of working on a business case, asking the province for extra resources. Unfortunately, right now, my submission, it's for the fiscal year 2023-24, and I'm asking for at least 1 more provincial officer, and I'll ask for another 1 for fiscal year 24-25. So I'm just putting the business case together, and I will submit probably next week to the district for them to review, and then if they agree to push it forward to the province and see what decision they're going to make in regards to that. So I'm not sure if there's any questions from any of the board members.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? I see Director Cote. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Always appreciate you coming and giving a report to the board. I'm wondering if there's any breakdown as to what area in particular, or if it's spread out across the region for the mischief to property and theft.
The numbers the statistics I've seen is it's fairly spread out, so it's not really specific to one area that we could focus on. So which makes it a bit more difficult for us in regards of if it was specific to one area, we could focus on that, but it's been spread out, unfortunately.
Thank you. I know that the Faber Dixon Road Block Watch is working with the RCMP to make sure that there's a connection there. If there's any action happening in that area of the community, I'd like to see more of these block watches all over the regional district would be great. Thank you.
No, and if I can add a comment on that, like as far as like if there's any group that wants to set up a block watch and you have any questions, what's required, the training required, please feel free to contact the detachment. You can speak to Dave Couson. He's a city manager for community policing, and he's quite experienced in that field. And you can contact him. He'll provide all the details and all the requirements, and can assist you in starting the group and training as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions for the inspector? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, Inspector, and it's nice to meet you, Sergeant.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the next item, which I believe is correspondence for action. Item 7A is a request for appointment and alternate appointment to the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board for 2022. I'm wondering, Dr. Cote, if you just wanted to speak to this directly.
Sure. I would like to be reappointed. I feel like I'm working right now on trying to get some support for the rural areas that have no bricks and mortar. We're the only one in all of Viral that has no bricks and mortar. And we're not caught in the catchment. Tofino is looking at building a new library, and the catchment is only for the residents count of Tofino, does not take into consideration any of the areas around it, which we are paying into the library and we're not being counted. So I'd like to continue on with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote. Director McNabb?
I would move that Director Cote be reappointed to the position.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Okay, any comments? Director Steer?
Yeah, I would like to thank Director Cote personally for recognizing the importance of the larger catchment area, especially in the electoral areas and some of the non-treaty nations that utilize the services of the Tofino Library. And it's important because it also is reflective in the scope and size of the building and the services that they provide. So I very appreciate it from this end, and thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, so
Mr. Chair, we also need to nominate or appoint a alternate to the library board. This year it was yourself.
yes, it was myself last year. I'm wondering if anybody else is interested in the position. I'm happy to do it, but if somebody else is interested, I think it's always a good use to cross-train. Dr. Reimer, would you like to volunteer Dr. Shannon? Or? Okay. Okay, I can stand again for that. But I'm not going to move you. Thank you, Director Beckett. So moved. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Johnson. Okay, comments? Are you sure? Okay, all those for, thank you. Against? Okay, motion carried. Thank you.
Who said there's no railway in Port Alberni?
Okay, that brings us to correspondence for information. Would anyone like to pull anything out? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
The nominations for AVICC. I'm wondering if Director Cote would be interested in stepping up her involvement in that group.
Please go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. This year I am the first vice president, and next year I will be running for president. So I will be running for that position.
So in that light, I'd like to nominate Director Cote for president of AVICC.
Okay, is that something that we do by resolution, or how does that work?
So Director Cote, there's forms she has to fill out, and you can get two directors or two people to nominate. It's not required at this point.
Okay, so Director Cote, you'll be able to circulate those for signature? Go ahead.
I'll bring them into the office, and if two directors could sign that, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to speak to anything else? Okay, seeing no more comments, if we could have a motion to receive the items for information. Thank you, Director Roberts, and seconded by Director Paulson. Okay, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to item 9A, which is the AVICC 2022 resolutions notice and request for submissions.
I can quickly speak to that, Mr. Chair. So AVICC has put out their first call to their membership for resolutions for consideration at the 2022 convention. The convention is being held April 1st to 3rd, 2022 in Victoria. So staff are asking directors to start considering possible resolutions and submit them to staff before January 14th. That will give staff time to draft the resolutions and required background information and bring it back for consideration of endorsement by the board by the deadline, which is at the end of January.
Okay, it seems like that timeline can work as long as we're on top of it. So we'll make sure to have any committees move that up to the board and the board to make sure that we're on top of that.
Yes, and I'll send out some reminders as we go along here.
Okay, the motion does set forth that framework though, so it would be helpful to have that moved and seconded. Thank you, Director Cote, and seconded by. Thank you, Director McNabb. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to Island Health Service Funding Contract for the Albany Health Network. Who would be introducing that?
I will speak to that again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So the regional district has received funding for the health network again, $80,000 per year for 3 years, commencing January 2022 for a total of $240,000. The regional district has been receiving this amount since 2015 for the health network, and it's to support the retaining a coordinator to support the health network. So regional district staff are recommending that the board enter into this new contract. As well, the health network has asked the board to consider sending a letter to Island Health, thanking them for the continued funding and support for the network, but to consider in future years an increase to reflect cost of living and increased operating costs. So there's 2 resolutions there for consideration by the board, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions or resolutions? Thank you, Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll make the first resolution that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors enter into a 3-year funding service contract with Island Health on behalf of the Alberni Claycott Health Network in the amount of $80,000 per year for a total of $240,000 commencing December 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Director McNabb. Okay, are there any comments? Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just the next recommendation, sending the letter. I'm wondering if also if there's any possibility of any type of grants that we could possibly link in with this so that we can top up the wage, because it hasn't changed in quite a number of years, and it probably will be affecting the response from our coordinator, and it would be good to top it up because I think it's going to affect what we're going to be receiving. Thank you. I can make that recommendation too.
We'll do it one at a time. So we do have the first motion.
Okay.
Any comments on that? Further comments? Is seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, and then that brings it to the next one. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'll make a recommendation that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors forward a letter to Island Health, thanking them for the continued funding for the Alberni Claycott Health Network, and request that Island Health consider an increase to the annual funding amount to reflect increased cost of living and operating costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Director Reimer? Okay. Any comments? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I'm kind of wondering if our COVID restart money could be, applied to that, which is the next item we got coming up. Like some of it, not all of it, naturally.
Okay. Terry? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I would have to look into the activities. Like we have to link that work to COVID. So I would have to talk with the existing coordinator to find out if there's been any additional workload or impacts as a result of COVID, because we have to make sure there's a direct link for that funding. But I'm not super aware of the activities, so we could look into that.
Go ahead, Director McNabb.
So I'm saying that, not knowing if we're actually utilizing 100% of our COVID restart funds within this request that's next here. So
Yes, the next report, the provincial COVID-19 restart grant allocation, is to allocate the remaining 146,000 that we have available to us.
I guess if I scroll down on my right side instead of my left side, I would have caught that. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the next item, which is the restart grant application. Go ahead.
I will introduce this. So this report recommends the allocation of the remaining $146,000 of the restart funds that were received from the province earlier this year. The board must allocate these remaining funds by the end of the year. However, we don't actually need to spend the funds in 2021. We can extend those funds to 2022, even 2023 if we like, as long as we can link them back to COVID. Staff have built a report off of the presentation that we did in May to the Committee of the Whole on May 12th. And we have considered all of the things, all of our services and COVID impacts, as well as the board's request for a weighting towards the rural areas. And finally, we aligned with the strategic plan. So the report uses all of those funds, and I'm happy to go over each of the items in detail if you like, but we did provide a description of what they would be for, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Or motions? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So, I mean, with what I was just speaking about, I don't know if there's an opportunity to temporarily at least pull like $10,000 or $15,000 out, so we can consider reapplying it to another purpose there in the short term, and maybe come back to the December meeting, and staff will have the information, and we can direct it in whichever direction we want to go with it at that point.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. I'm trying to think of it logistically. So the Health Network grant, we're going to follow it up here with a request for proposal process for a 3-year term. I'd probably want to allocate these grant fundings in the first year, but we could still make that work. Yeah, we could definitely take that back to the drawing board and reach out to the ACHN coordinator and find out the impacts of COVID. I think as to where to pull it out of this 146, I think that we've kind of ranked them for the most part in the order of importance or risk level for us. So it would be to reduce the regional community parks amount by whatever Director McNabb recommends, 10 or 20,000 for us to look at, and proceed with those other items that are above it.
Go ahead.
So I would I would move that we reduce the regional community parks budget by 10,000 to maybe perhaps reallocate this to the health network program, and have staff review that to see if that's acceptable or possible.
Okay, that seems clear enough to me, as long as it can be expressed in a motion pretty clearly. I think Wendy's working on that right now. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Wendy, yeah, we're okay with the motion?
Yes, we are. The other comment I wanted to make, and I was going to check with Director Cote or Cole, because they sit on the network, is part of what the coordinator does is look for other funding opportunities to support the network. So they do actively look for other grants that could offset or increase the cost of the coordinator contract.
Thanks. I have Director Bodner and then Director McNabb.
Thank you. When it was this 40,000 for trails for saying for designs for construction and guidelines, the log train trail management plan, does that construction mean new construction, or would it be construction of damage done perhaps to a bridge, or the flooding somewhat had to be done because it's flooding of an area?
So the guidelines for sustainable design and construction is a document that we would develop so that we start to get some consistency amongst our trail network across the valley and the region. So it is actually a document that would kind of outline what types of bridges we're going to put in and what types of sign, or I guess the signage is separate, but there's a more detailed package about what this was involved in the committee of the whole that was in August. But it's actually not to do any construction itself. It's to develop more procedures and guidelines for staff to use as we're recommending things moving forward.
Thank you.
Director McNabb.
Okay, I just try to think. What should sort of be amplified a little bit here is that this funding was regional district funding, like for the regional district areas. The municipalities received separate funding. So I'm thinking and hoping that if this is part of the package that goes to the health network, that the municipalities will recognize that it's regional area funding, and that maybe they would like to join us in participating. Just saying.
Okay, so with that, are there any other comments? Because I think we have the idea of the amendment now. Oh, sorry, Director Roberts, you didn't see that. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Maybe this should be addressed to Mr. Erg. I see that in 2021, we're allocating $15,000 for resources to support the increase in development applications, and then an additional $66,000 for the same thing in next year. Could you expand on that and give me a little information on what those resources we're looking for? Thank you.
Yes, so it would be a combination of administrative support and technical support on processing our applications and moving them forward. I think, as I've mentioned in previous reports to the board, we have, I think, about 20 public hearings related to development applications. We have another 7 public hearings related to the zoning bylaw and OCP amendments that we need to do. A number of open houses related to the OCP and zoning bylaw review, and there's a lot of preparation and work goes into that, as well as a backlog of applications that we would like to work through. So there is some administrative staff available to do some of that work, and then we would be reaching out for some temporary support through a combination of contract and possibly a temporary staff to do some of the technical planning work as well.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so with that in mind, any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing that, Wendy, go ahead.
Could I just confirm with Terry then? So I understand this motion that's on the floor right now is to staff to investigate if COVID restart fundings or funds could be allocated to the Alberni Clockwise Health Network. And if so, community parks fund be reduced by 10,000. But should we just refer this back to staff and come back with?
I think if we could just reduce the 40,000 to 30,000 in the table, that's part of the recommendation for the community parks, and make the allocation to be $136,000 total, then staff will automatically have to bring back that extra 10,000 for discussion by the end of December. So I think that achieves, Wendy, what we need to do. And then when we bring that 10,000 back, we will also discuss, if it is eligible, we'll also discuss what the impact to that 40,000 is, because there's kind of 4 components that the Community Services Department had recommended as the parks. So we'll talk about specifically what we'd be reducing out of that parks plan as part of that report, either later this month or at the December meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. So I think we can move ahead as that stated. That so that Dr.
You want me to
Knapp,
make that motion?
you do make the motion
Modify what I already said to something else?
to what that was. What Terry?
Well, where's this suggested motion? That the Albany Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve the allocation subject to removing $10,000 from the parks. What was it called?
Yeah, regional community parks.
The Regional Community Parks budget. Does that work?
Yeah, I think that's well understood. Yeah. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bogner. Any comments? Okay, seeing none, we will have time to come back and tie off any loose ends that may occur if the answer is yes, and go from there. So with that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that worked out. Okay, and lastly, in that, we have the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department Water Tender Apparatus RFP. I don't know, speaking to that.
I'm assuming Charlie is, but
Oh, yeah.
he's not popping up yet. So-
Charlie is here, just,
Okay.
Okay, please go ahead, Charlie.
yes, the recommendation from Sprout Lake's Water Tender Apparatus Committee was to go with a proposal from Hub Fire Engines. And while this proposal was not the lowest on the front page, when it was viewed a little deeper, there were some options that they were offering that made it the most cost-effective and proposal that we received. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
I'd just like to make the recommendation that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the contract to supply a water tender apparatus to the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department to Hub Fire Engines and Equipment Limited in the amount of $436,409 plus taxes. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Reimer. And then for comments, I have Dr. Roberts up first. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that report. I read it thoroughly, and I'm just wondering if Charlie can expand on what this means for the insurance that would otherwise affect the homeowners on around Sprout Lake. Thank you.
Yes, so for the Fire Underwriters Survey, Sprout Lake has attained the Credentials for Superior Tanker Shuttle accreditation. And that requirement means that to keep those accreditation, they have to replace their apparatus at 20 years of age. And there is no option to extend that out, as some departments have done, to 25 or 30 years. So having this apparatus replaced now will let them keep that Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accreditation, which does in fact affect the insurance ratings for the area around Sprout Lake.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments or questions? Director Roberts, follow up?
If I may, just to follow up on that, thanks for that, Charlie. And just to let everybody know that without the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service, the insurance rating for that community, without having hydrants and so on, this is an equivalency to having fire hydrants in the area. And once that service is met, it can probably save homeowners somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 a year on their insurance. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, it's been moved by Director Cote, seconded by Director Reimer. Are there any further comments? Director McNabb?
Just a bit of a logistic question. So we're at $488,000 here. If there's cost overruns on this truck and it puts it over $500,000, is that problematic on a governance basis?
Like because of free trade agreements, is that what you're talking about?
I mean, it'll put it over 500. We're borrowing over 500 at that point. So
the financial plan for this service does need to be amended to include this, because this was not the plan at the beginning of the year, although this is going to be purchased physically in 2022. So no, the $500,000 threshold doesn't make a difference. What we're working with the chief and right now is we are going to use some equipment financing through MFA to fund this piece of apparatus. We're just trying to determine whether we want to fund all of it with it or a portion of it. So we're still flushing out the impacts of decommissioning Hull 2. And as part of the financial plan process, we're reevaluating the long-term plan and we'll figure out how much we're going to borrow for this.
Oh, you muted Director McNabb.
I muted myself, but I'm muted. What I'm trying to get to is whether what's our threshold of borrowing before we have to go to the public and referendum on a service such as the fire department.
I see. No, it's actually a length of time. So if we were to have to borrow for greater than 5 years, then we have to go to referendum. It's not actually a dollar value impact. So we're comfortable that we can pay this in the 5-year term using the existing limits in the Sprout Lake Fire Department.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right, that brings us to item 10.1. That brings us into item A. Mike, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak to the planning applications today. So the first application for the board is for 4720 Dayton Road. I just note that this, all the conditions for this application that the board required have been met. It is a rezoning from RA2, which has a minimum of 1 acre parcel size, to RA3, which has 8.6 acre minimum parcel size to facilitate a 1-lot subdivision, and staff recommends adoption of the bylaw.
Thank you. Director McNabb?
So I would move that the bylaw P1429 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Reimer. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item B. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a rezoning application for property in Cherry Creek at 2996 Highmore Road. This public hearing was held November 1st. I would note that no members of the public were in attendance. One letter was received, and the letter was generally opposed to the application. There was concerns that the property had previously been used for agricultural use. Staff do recommend that the board proceed with second and third reading, and I would just note that this rezoning application does comply with the official community plan for the area. happy to answer any questions.
Great. So it looks like there are 3 motions on the first page and then 1 more on the next. Dr. Bodner, did you want to take it? Please go ahead. Oh, don't forget to turn your microphone on. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? All those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
I'd like to move that bylaw P1433, Regional District of Alberni Quayquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
I'd like to move that the bylaw P1433, Regional District of Alberni Quayquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Director Cote. Any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right. That brings us to item C. Please go ahead.
Yes, so this is the second public hearing that was held for a property in Cherry Creek at 2404 Timber Lane Road. This is the campsite at the Timber Lodge. So the public hearing was held on November 2nd. Again, note that there were no members of the public in attendance. There were 2 letters received prior to the public hearing. The letters were in relation to 2 parking issues that exist on Timber Lane Road and some concerns about that. So the application, the rezoning application is to rezone from tourist commercial C6, which allows for a hotel motel use, to a campground commercial C8 use to legalize the campground expansion that happened on the property. The owners didn't realize that the C6 zoning didn't allow the campsite, so they had done some expansion and subsequently had to apply to rezone. I would note with regards to the parking issue, there's steps that have to happen before this bylaw can be adopted. The first one is that because this property is next to a controlled access highway, Highway 4, the Ministry of Transportation must review it again, and actually they physically have to sign off on the bylaw. So we will share the concerns with them. There's also a development permit requirement for the campground expansion, and through that we can ensure that that the campground parking all occurs on site. I think the concerns for the parking are in relation to the existing hotel and restaurant that have been there. Historically, has been there for a long time. And again, staff recommend that the board proceed with second and third reading, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you for that. Director Bodner?
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Seconded by Director McNabb. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Seconded by Director Reimer. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
And I'd like to move that bylaw P1434, Regional District of Alberni Quayquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director McNabb. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
And to move that bylaw P1434, Regional District of Alberni Quayquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay, any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item D. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so Amy Anak has been going to speak to this, but I just wanted to introduce it. So this is the housing needs reports for the Alberni Valley, and I just want to acknowledge some of the outstanding work that Amy has done on this. It is a big project. It is part of 10 housing needs reports that the ACRD is working on between the electoral areas and the Treaty First Nations that are part of the regional district. And I will turn it over to Amy to present the reports.
Thank you. Please, Amy, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon.
You're going to have to speak up quite a bit.
Sharing my screen there. Can you hear me now?
If you lean closer like that, yeah, you should. There you
Phone's better?
go. So much better. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So as Mike said, I am going to go through a presentation that provides an overview of the Alberni Valley electoral areas housing needs reports that were recently completed. And this presentation, of course, supports the request for decision, recommending that the board receive the Alberni Valley housing needs reports, as well as direct staff to publicize the reports. And so the presentation today is largely going to be an overview of the sub-regional Alberni Valley electoral areas report, which covers the 4 Alberni Valley electoral areas. And just noting that there are 4 separate reports for each of the Alberni Valley electoral areas with very detailed information. So we won't go into great detail about the 4 areas specific reports and keep it sort of higher level today. Sorry about that. A quick overview about the housing needs reports that recently were completed. So as of 2019, legislative requirements were put in place for local governments to complete the housing needs reports, and those need to be completed by April 2022, as well as they need to be updated every 5 years after. So why and how? So the reports basically look at current and anticipated housing needs, as well as come up with a bunch of strategies to help better understand and respond to these housing needs. And I'll go into details more about this, but basically they're completed through data collection, analysis, as well as different community engagement. And I wanted to note that the ACRD Housing Needs Report Project was initiated in November 2020, and this was after receiving UBCM grant funds. And this project is 100% funded by that grant. So this image here sort of just displays how the entire ACRD Housing Needs Project is laid out. And so you can see there at the top, there's going to be an overall ACRD Housing Needs Report that will, sort of act as a summary to sort of explain the 10 housing needs reports, or the 10 separate housing needs reports. And so on the left there, the Bamfield Housing Report was already presented to the board and was completed in the summer in July, and that's sort of like a standalone report. The Uchuckalsit Tribe Government Report has been developed and presented to their executive, and we're just finishing final touches on that report. The Hawaiian First Nations report is underway now, and as well, then we look at the Alberni Valley overall sub-regional report as we're presenting on today. And so there's the 4 electoral area reports that fall under that, as well as a West Coast study is being completed. And that also includes districts of Tofino and Ukiulet and Tolokuat First Nations. And Long Beach Electoral Area C, Toquat, and Ukiulet are a part of the West Coast part. So at the end of the day, we're going to end up with 10 different area-specific reports, 2 sub-regional, as well as an overall. And before I move on with presenting some of the data, I just wanted to take a minute here to just explain some of the data, as well as the limitations of it. So it's important to note that these housing needs reports are really a point-in-time analysis. So there's information available, and we're capturing that at a certain point in time. So there are definitely going to be changes to that data, as well acknowledging that the reports are based on the most recent census being 2016. And so that is the best and most reliable form of data that we have that is available. As well, the province put together a data set for all local governments to use when creating these housing needs reports, and that data set is based on 2016 census data. I just wanted to also note that the 2021 census population and dwelling data will be available in February 2022, and then other data sets will be released after that. So we will update the housing needs reports with that more recent data when it becomes available. And then that some of our electoral areas are smaller, have smaller population sizes. It's important to note that any changes to small populations can have a larger impact as opposed to larger areas. As well, the population household projections that we use in these reports use the best practices that are available to us. So the housing needs reports were completed through various qualitative and quantitative data analysis. And I think one of the most important things or parts of these housing reports was all of the community engagement that we completed. I really feel that getting the local input into these reports is invaluable, and really they wouldn't be what they are without this input. And so we completed community engagement probably over the course of last year, and I wanted to highlight that initially we collaborated with the City of Port Alberni on community engagement to sort of streamline. And so we did a joint online survey that had close to 670 responses. And then we did a joint online community forum, as well as interviewed and surveyed stakeholders across the Alberni Valley. And then once the city's report was completed, we did a little bit of extra engagement and did a joint Alberni Valley APC meeting, as well as a few other methods there. So this image here, I'm not going to go through all of the stats, but I just wanted to highlight a few key findings from the engagement. So it's important to note that, almost about 3/4 of respondents are homeowners, 1/4 are retired, and over 80% of respondents prefer to live in a single detached dwelling, as well as they do live in a single detached dwelling. So that's sort of an obvious stat, but just reconfirming that. As well as households are a large number, over 60% of households are made up of 1 and 2 people. And if you drill that down, about 44% are 2-person households. So very small household sizes across the Alberni Valley. And then the last thing I'll highlight from this is that people generally across the Alberni Valley have lived in their homes for quite a while, like 10 years plus, as well as they plan to live in those homes for the next 10, 20 to 30 years. So really keeping that in mind as we come up with recommendations for those wanting to age in place as they grow older. Current conditions in the Alberni Valley. So in terms of the demographic profile, the population decreased slightly between 2006 and 2016, as sort of shown on the graph there. The median age increased, the number of households grew, and the average household size has decreased. And so that term there, or that has to do with the older population, or the population of the Alberni Valley becoming older, which results in a lower household size. And these two charts here show, the first one shows population by age group. And so you can see here that the yellow and lighter blue at the top shows the population 50 and over, 50 to 64, and then 65 plus. And just highlighting areas such as Beaufort and Sprout Lake, you can see that over about 60% of the population is over 50 years of age. So that's definitely a significant amount. And of course, the bar, second bar to the right there shows the City of Port Alberni and the ACRD as a whole. So a little bit lower percentages in terms of that older population. The second graph there shows households by size. And you can see here, as I alluded to earlier, that in the dark blue at the bottom and the orange, if you combine those together, those add the 1 and 2-person households. So you can see that the majority of households across the Alberni Valley are 1 to 2-person households, with the most being 2. In terms of economic profile, median household income increased for Beaufort and Sprout Lake from 2006 to 2016. And you can really see here that this chart sort of shows how median household income sort of fluctuated a lot over the last 10 years here, as well as major industries, healthcare, construction, agriculture, retail, no surprise there, as well as the unemployment rate increased between 2011 and 2016. And then when we look at the housing profile, as I mentioned earlier, single detached dwellings are the most popular form of housing, followed by movable. And then the majority of homes across the Alberni Valley are, aging or older, and many were built before 1980, as well as many are larger, so 3, 4, some 5-bedroom houses. The assessed value and purchase prices have increased, as we all know. As well, renter households are more likely to be in core or extreme core housing needs. So core housing needs means that a household is spending more than 30% of their income on shelter costs. Extreme core housing needs is spending more than 50% of their housing costs. So there's exact numbers, and of course, each of the reports. I won't go into detail on that right now. This graph here shows the dwellings by number of bedrooms. So of course, it just supports what I had mentioned before about the majority of dwellings are larger, 3, 4+ bedrooms. In terms of future needs in the Alberni Valley, when we look at community growth, the Alberni Valley as a whole is expected to grow by about 665 people between 2016 and 2026. And that's shown on the graph here. It basically shows the projected age distribution. And so the yellow shows 25 to 64 years. And then that blue at the top shows the 65 plus. And so you can see there that the senior population is expected to continue to grow over the next 5 years, as well as the projections show the number of households will start to grow again. This slide has a bunch of information on it, but basically it shows the graphs show on the left the projected population. So not too much change is projected by 2026. And then on the right, the projected households. So again, a steady sort of increase in both of the projected population and households. And part of the housing needs work is to come up with, a best estimate of a housing gap. And so that gap really is the difference between the projected number of households and the projected number of dwellings required to house those people. And then that's based on average household size. And so these projection calculations indicate that areas such as Sprout Lake, Beaver Creek, and Cherry Creek could have a surplus of housing if the current trends continue, as well as the average household size could decrease over the next 5 years, and that's across the Alberni Valley, which could drive up the demand for housing, as we all know. This slide here shows the recommendations, and these recommendations are the ones from the overall Alberni Valley electoral areas, that sub-regional report. So they're definitely more higher level recommendations. And it's important to note that each of the separate Alberni Valley electoral area reports have specific recommendations that highlight and are tailored to each of the area's unique opportunities and challenges. So really some of the overall recommendations are formulating regional policy options and mostly in terms of future updates to the OCPs, looking at strengthening policies and regulations, of course, to improve affordability and availability, and really looking at different housing types for all stages in life. We heard that over and over again in the engagement that people want a variety of housing, not just single family, and they want to be able to live in their home young as well as they age. And then recommendations around developing and strengthening partnerships and collaborating, of course, educating, consider creating a housing strategy and action plan. And that would include, opportunities for funding, tool to incentivize housing, and then lastly, complete ongoing monitoring of regional housing supply. And so that sort of looks at updating the housing needs reports with the most current data available and that sort. And then how we're going to implement the housing needs reports. So it is the hope that each separate electoral area housing needs report will be used by the area in planning and provision of housing. And one of the main things is informing future OCP updates, as well as when, the ACRD is looking at development decisions. local housing information for stakeholders so they can have a better understanding of the housing needs and conditions in the electoral areas, as well as I mentioned previously, the data will be used as a comparison in future housing needs reports. So we'll essentially take the data that was used in these reports and add the 2021 and future census years, as well as really focusing on collaborating, on those community goals to address the demographic changes, increased development interest that we're seeing, and the changing socioeconomic conditions, as well as just overall growth in the region as a whole. So the next steps with the reports, once the Alberni Valley reports are received by the board of directors, they will be publicized and then presented as requested. The 3 West Coast housing needs reports that are part of this ACRD project are currently being developed, and they are anticipated to be presented to the board at the next meeting in November. The 3 Treaty First Nations housing needs reports, one of them has been presented to the council and or executives, and the rest will be presented November and December. And then the overall ACRD summary, which will be a summary of the 10 housing needs reports, is anticipated to be presented at the last board meeting of the year, December 8th. And then wrapping up this project will be the final UBCM grant report, which is due in January 2022. So that was a very quick overview of a lot of data and work. So I will stop there and see if anyone has to add.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions? Please go ahead, Dr. Roberts.
Yes, through the chair to Amy. Much appreciated the amount of work as Mike has mentioned, and we look forward definitely to the report on the West Coast coming up, perhaps next meeting. That would be great. It's, as we discussed earlier, and I spoke to you on the phone, there is a meeting coming up here on tomorrow, actually, and staff and myself will be attending it via Zoom. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say as well. But again, thank you for all the hard work you put into this, Amy. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Are there any other comments? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Great job, Amy. I'd like to know, I'm sure that we'll be presenting this to the Health Network in the near future.
That can definitely be arranged, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have 2 motions in front of us, the first of which is to receive and the second of which is to direct staff. Dr. Cote? Motion.
I'll move that we receive it.
Great, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Okay, any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. And a motion to direct staff to publish.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Cote, seconded by Director Beckett. Any further comments? Okay, let's make sure we're big on the social media share as well, because I really want to reshare this works. Thank you. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
One thing that I think would be valuable for this to be directly forwarded to our APC members.
Oh, very good idea. That's something that we could do, right? Yep. Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Great. Okay, that brings us into item 11. There's no 11.1, 11.2. There is one report for 11.3, which is Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission minutes. This would be a motion to receive and have comments on. Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. I've moved to receive the minutes.
Thank you. And seconded by Director McNabb. Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm sorry I haven't forwarded the minutes in the past, but I thought it's got a lot of very good, valuable information in it about what's happening in the community. And I'm sure there's going to be something that directors will find interesting in the report. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, anecdotally, looking at the report made me think of, I think one of our earlier interactions, it was the centennial for Alberni Valley, and you were in full costume. It was great. Okay, is there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. I still have the button you gave me. I put it on our bedroom lamp. Okay, I don't believe we have any unfinished business, although we do have the late business item. Director Bodner, if you wanted to talk about the letter of kind of recognition and support for, I believe, Mr. Plain and Dr. Hasselbeck.
Yes, that's correct. I'd like to make a formal motion in, please. I'd like to move that the Alberni Clay Court Regional District Board of Directors forward a joint letter with the Air Quality Council to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, applauding their dedication and support for the regional district's adoption of air quality bylaws in region, and in particular recognize the support received from Mr. Earl Payne and Dr. Paul Hasselbeck.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roberts. Do we have any other comments? I think just on behalf of the conversations and interactions I've had with at least Dr. Hasselbeck have been nothing but positive, and the Hishuk Masawak thinking that he brought, that everything is connected, thinking that he brought to the table was very much something that I found compatible with my First Nations values. And yeah, he's definitely someone who will be quite influential in how I think about things, especially when it comes to health and the things that it overlaps with. So, yeah. With that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right. Thank you, Dr. Bonner. Dr. Paulson, please go ahead.
I'm sorry I didn't speak up right at the very start with regards to late business. And perhaps Director Minions could support me on this real brief comment. At our city council meetings, and I think that regional district directors should be aware that we've actually had people who are anti-mask, anti-vaxxers use the platform.
Before we move forward, I'm wondering if we could just have this added to late business with a motion. If you'd like to move that, we can get a seconder.
Yeah, just a motion just to give a brief update on developments with regards to liability of elected and appointed officials as perceived by members of the community.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Brown. I believe we need to get 2/3 or 3/4. Yep. Okay. So with that, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, please continue, Dr. Paulson.
Anyhow, just very, very briefly, I won't hold this up very long, but there's been 2 council meetings in succession where members of the public have chosen to use council meeting as a platform to present their case with regards to anti-masking and anti-vaxxing, and actually have bypassed our wishes in council with regards to signage, with regards to people sitting in the audience wearing masks. And they have come into council, sat in with the audience in council. Our council meetings have been fairly heavily attended, and they chose to sit in the middle of the public without masks and to kind of defy the wishes of the city and council. And I guess probably this is just a chance for us to be proactive if this situation actually winds up in our boardroom at some time, how we may want to react to that. I think this is a form of bullying, to be quite honest. We weren't served, but we were given a document that was addressed to each councillor And the headline is Vaccine Notice of Liability to Elected and Appointed Officials on Notice to Ron Paulson. And there's several pages of I don't know what in this, and I would refer this to our legal department. Anyway, I just wanted to give a heads up that there is potential for this to happen. They seem to want to use local, whether it be city council, and just a heads up that it could potentially happen to a regional district meeting. And we might want it to have some consideration how we would handle that situation. And I defer to Director Minions to maybe just give a quick update on prospectively how council may deal with this in the future. Director Minions, are you still here?
I am. Thank you, Director Paulson.
Yeah, I'll have quite a bit to say right after you, Director Minions. So please go ahead.
Great. Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge, and I do want to clarify that while we have had a couple people attending our council meetings, and we are requiring, it is our policy that masks be worn throughout the entire meeting. In the audience at council, we are separated by plexiglass, so we are not wearing masks ourselves. And that said, we have had a couple of people not wearing masks, and they do claim to have medical exemptions. And so it's not a, blatantly not wearing a mask and just saying I'm not wearing a mask. It is a claim of a medical exemption. The challenge is that as a local government, we really struggle with how to regulate that. And when is it our place to say to someone, well, you have a medical exemption, then you have to leave this council meeting. At the end of our last council meeting, it did get somewhat disruptive just in our question period, I would say, being abused and an opportunity to debate an issue that is not a municipal issue. And that was frustrating to see. Moving forward, if we continue to have challenges, our intent is to adjourn our meeting and reschedule it for another time. We are not going to let a debate on a provincial health issue impact the business of our council meetings. But it is a bit of a challenge. And, while we certainly want everyone to have the right to their own, decisions and everything else, we certainly don't see it as our place to get involved or overrule a provincial health order and not follow it. And it's just not something that we're entertaining at all. And that's very much what we're being asked to do. So appreciate Councillor Paulson or Director Paulson giving a heads up here. And I think it is something that I've said at the city that we need to take a look at and really come up with a firm policy on, and regional district may need to as well. Thank you.
Good timing, Director Minions. Okay, so if the document that you received, Director Paulson, is what I think it is and what I've already seen, you can pretty much just tear them up because it's sovereign citizen, yeah, exactly, or freeman on land claptrap. It has no legal basis in the United States or in English common law. It's completely founded on fallacy. There's so much I could say about it, but I'll stop. And in fact, I have thought about what would happen if we had a bunch of people registered and they start to do this, because there is a group that had been traveling on the east coast of Vancouver Island, moving from Victoria northwards and going into businesses and trying to be as disruptive as possible, mostly for their own social media campaigns at this point. When such a thing occurs here, I think adjourning, even temporarily, and then switching to an online-only meeting is likely going to be the recourse that we would take. The one thing I would need to figure out with Wendy or others is whether and to what degree that would still fall under the bylaws as we've passed them, because they would no longer be hybrid if they were online only. That being said, we may want to look at some sort of amendment for that sort of situation and go from there. I think the medical exemption aspect is something that needs to be proven, but that's part of the problem in and of itself. So I think adjourning and just going, okay, see you in cyberspace. Like that's what we would do as well. And I think maybe what we need to do is potentially look into seeing if we have already have the means to do that, or if maybe we need to amend the bylaw to allow for some sort of escape valve of that sort. That being said, perhaps it might be beneficial to have staff look into that with a motion from the board, if that's all right. Which I'll move.
I would support that motion or second it.
Okay.
Chair Jack.
Okay, so just to look into and provide a report for what our recourse would be to move to online only, perhaps even on the same day. Okay. Wendy, you got something to that effect?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. With that in mind, if we do, then we'll just use that tool. But if we don't, then we'll likely have to go through an amendment process. That being said, thank you for bringing this up, Director Paulson. I think going about it in this way is probably the right way to do it. Hopefully the city has even more tools to deal with it as well. But yeah, that being said, are there any comments? Director Beckett and Director Roberts, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Director Paulson or Director Minions, is there a requirement to be double vaxxed before you come into a council meeting? And is that something that other communities or municipalities or regional governments have done? And if so, would that not eliminate a lot of those challenges? And just for the record, I'm so frustrated with this as a school board trustee. I'm faced with the same emails and criticisms. I just want to get on with it. I'm done. I'm absolutely done. So thank you.
So the response I've gotten from staff here is that local governments don't have the ability to require proof of vaccination. It needs to be stated by the public health officer or through provincial legislation because of the protection of privacy and all that kind of thing. I don't know if it's the same for municipalities, however. So if it's any different, Dr. Minions, please go ahead.
No, as far as we know, we don't have that ability, and our council meetings are exempt from the vaccine pass system as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. The same way that buses and ferries are, I believe. Dr. Roberts?
That question was asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, are there any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you again, Dr. Paulson. That was a very good point to bring up. Okay, so that brings us into item 14, which is question period. I'm wondering if we have any questions coming to us through the email address?
Mr. Chair, there's no questions to the email address today. We do have one attendee. If the attendee would like to ask a question, now would be the time for the Q&A. We'll just give a few minutes to see if they have anything.
Okay, I have the Q&A tab open. Okay, I don't think Ms. Sim has any comments or questions, or at least none that I see in the Q&A. Going once, going twice. Okay. Okay, so that'll state that we don't have any comments or questions during question period. Now that'll allow us to move into a motion to recess the meeting for the Regional Hospital District Board meeting. Could we get a motion to do so? Thank you, Director Roberts, seconded by Director McNabb. All those in favor? Motion carried.
So I'd like to call this meeting of the Regional Hospital District Board to get to order and recognize that we are meeting at least in the office at the traditional territories of the Petitions and Tishat First Nation, and that we honor and respect that. And this meeting is still being streamed as far as I know. Just for that, would I like to ask for an approval of agenda, please? Director Paulson, Director Cote, anything to add, to take away? All in favor? Opposed? carried. And adoption of the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting for October 13, 2021. Director Cote and Director Johnson. Anything there that needs to be corrected? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we have a letter from the Ministry of Health and West Coast General Hospital Foundation regarding West Coast General Emergency Department expansion. So a motion to receive that. Director Roberts, Director Beckett, anything to jump on there? No. So all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving right along. We got the reports from Banfield. Director Beckett.
Thank you. Beautiful downtown Banfield. VHA approved a second nurse and allowed the second nurse to work until probably mid-November to help with the various vaccine clinics. Speaking of vaccine clinics, a number of them have been conducted, including community COVID vaccines, as well as the regular flu vaccine clinic. Continuing on with clinics, they've also gotten into the school to do SD70 vaccines, and I'm not going to try to even recall them all, but there's grade 6, there's the regular flu, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they've done an excellent job. And the nursing staff wanted to pass on a shout out to Lady Rose. With the rains and storms, the road has been terrible. And the folks are relying on the Lady Rose to do the lab services. And they just can't say enough about that ability to get the blood work and other lab requisitions in and processed. So thank goodness the Lady Rose is up and running. So we're so grateful for that. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Albany Clayoquot Continuing Care Society, we met on the last Tuesday of the month. Just very preliminary report. We did have a discussion with Island Health regards to ongoing situations. Quite a positive discussion, and we also, we're given notice that there was an effect because of the vaccination requirements that both Fur Park and Echo were going to have some reduction in staff because of this. It's not huge, but even at this point in time, even 1 or 2 people missing from a facility like that is problematic. So hopefully that will find its own pathway to the future, and we'll be able to move forward progressively. That's about it. West Coast Native Health Care Society, Director Cote.
Thank you. I missed the last meeting, but I believe that they have a policy where they are getting all of their staff to be vaccinated. They've been talking about that for quite some time. Their next meeting will be, I believe, next week. Thanks.
Alrighty, and Tofino General Hospital.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Yeah, nothing to report new, the same old news, so I won't repeat as I often do, but just talking with the site director who's new there, that things are working, and it was an extremely busy season once again at the Tofino General Hospital.
Alberni Clayoquot Health Network, Director Cote.
No report at this time. We're doing the contract for the coordinator, so we did that at our regular board business. So looking forward to getting that out and request for proposals. Thanks.
Great, thank you. West Coast General Hospital, I'd just like to sort of put the word out that as you can see from the letter that we got from Island Health and the $2 million that that the foundation is expected to come up with. I mean, we have had some very significant donors, John Campbell of $500,000, the pool estate $200,000. And, as far as private donations, top of that list of that is Dave Kazagi at $40,000. And I recognize that we're not all in the situation that we can have that kind of disposable cash to put out to these. But if you can find something, it's year end, will be positive on a taxation basis. So if you can, within your friends and your family, just kind of give a nudge and say, hey, let's put something towards this. They're optimistic that they're going to make that $2 million point, but at this particular point in time, that money isn't on the table. So it would be really nice if we could kind of put our shoulders to the wheel and see if we can come up with something. My wife and I have already made a modest donation towards that, and I hope that others will too. Other reports. Anybody belong to other? A director of other. Women's services, we don't report on that. And we have got somebody on this board that is on that board, right? Don't we? Director Minions, are you not on that? The Women's Service Association, our Third Avenue.
Oh, ACOS.
Yeah, ACOS. Sorry, I wasn't sure at first what you were meaning, but
sure.
Alberni Community and Women's Services.
Yes.
So I was previously their board chair
Okay.
outside of my council or regional district role, and I'm not on that board anymore.
Okay.
I think it would be fantastic if we had some occasional reports from them. They do a lot of important work in the community.
Yes, that's for sure. Okay, somebody remove the receipt of the reports.
So moved.
So I think we got Director Jack and the flip up between Director Paulson and Director Beckett. I'll take Director Paulson. He's so out there today. Okay, all in favor?
Director Cote has her hand up.
So, oh, I'm sorry, Director Cote, you're at the bottom of my screen. Unfortunately, I missed you.
I'd just like to say that we could possibly have the minutes from the Health Network put on here because Ellen Freud, who is the director for a cause, reports, and the reports that come to the Health Network are extremely good information that I'm sure that the directors would get value out of. So I'll make sure that our minutes are included in the hospital board minutes. Thank you.
Okay, once we receive this, maybe we could make a motion to have Ellen give us a bit of a presentation before the year end. Is that possible? What do you think? Okay, well, let's receive this. Did we vote on this?
Not yet.
No, I don't think so. Okay, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Alrighty. So would somebody like to make a motion to invite Ellen Freud to our next or to a board meeting? Doesn't have to be the next one. So Director Cote, seconded by somebody, Director Reimer. And yes.
Can I speak to that?
Pardon me?
Can I speak to that, please?
Yeah.
That would be good to hear from her. But also, I'd like to have the Health Network minutes included in our reports for the hospital board, starting now, similar to the report that I had added from the Heritage Commission. So
I think there are two motions, so let's do it that way. Okay, on the first motion, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. And Director Cote.
I don't think we need to have a motion to have a report added.
Mr. Chair, no. I've made a note. We'll include the future network minutes on this agenda.
Alrighty, we'll go with that. So any late business? I think we just did that. Question period. Anybody got things they don't understand? Come on, guys, fess up. I know there's stuff you don't understand. Okay,
There's no questions to the email address we have set up. We do have one attendee still present. I'll just
Great.
check the comments
that's awesome.
for Q&A.
I don't think we've ever had an attendee online to this point of our day.
I don't see any questions or comments from the attendee.
Alrighty, question period being gone. Motion to adjourn. Director Beckett, Director Johnson, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Man, someday I'm going to get somebody opposed to adjourn. Okay, onward and upwards. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So we're reconvening at 3:10, and I will read out a motion with 2 points in regards to going in camera, and at which point we will cease live streaming and we'll boot out the attendee. But I'd like to thank her for staying for the whole meeting, which is great. Okay, so with this in mind, I'd like to move to close the meeting as per the community charter under sections 91C, labor relations, and under employee relations, and 91F, law enforcement, if the board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. And I will move that. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Director Roberts. Hey, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed?